And back to our breaking news story now, and here's everything we know about it this hour at the moment. In fact, well, a plane carrying the president of Poland, Lech Kaczynski, and his wife has crashed in western Russia. Russian officials say the plane was carrying 132 people, including Lech Kaczynski. The governor of Smolensk says no one survived, and he says it's likely the plane hit trees as it came into land. Came down on approach to an airport in Smolensk around 300 meters from the runway. Well, the mobile phones of everyone who was with the president are no longer working, according to officials, and he was heading for a personal visit to the memorial site where Polish officers were murdered during World War II. Russia's President Dmitry Medvedev has ordered the creation of a state investigation commission headed by Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. Well, more details on this as we get them. Let's now take a look at some background. Let me give you some more information on Lech Kaczynski, Polish president. He was elected in 2005, and before that, he served as mayor of the Polish capital, Warsaw. Lech Kaczynski had a twin brother, Yaroslav, who worked as Polish prime minister. The man's political career started in the 80s when he joined the Workers' Solidarność movement. He was one of the close allies of the first Polish president, Lech Walesa. Well, this is information that we have for you this hour here on RT, and we will be bringing you more as we get it. So far, though, it's been confirmed there are no survivors of this crash that happened near Smolensk, and the plane that was heading there had Lech Kaczynski, Polish president, on board, and his wife, as well as 132 other people who were with him on the plane. Well, also what we know is that the investigation commission has been set up by President Medvedev, and this commission will be headed by Russia's Prime Minister Vladimir Putin.
Continue our breaking news coverage here of the death of the Polish president, the crash of the plane just south of an airport in Russia's western Smolensk region. We can now cross live to RT's Katerina Azarova and RT's Daniel Bushell as well. Daniel Bushell is standing at the Foreign Ministry, and Katerina Azarova is outside the Kremlin. So, Daniel, first, take us through all the details we know about this tragedy so far.
The latest reports from the Foreign Ministry is that 96 are dead, 88 of them Polish high-level officials from politics, diplomatic circles, and also the defence ministries. We're hearing three issues are coming in for question. One is the pilot, two is the airport, and three is the plane itself. Let's start with the pilot. Latest reports, he refused and ignored commands from air traffic control in Belarus, flying from Poland through Belarus to Russia to land in the Belarus capital Minsk. He went on to Smolensk, where the weather conditions meant he tried to land 4 times without success before hitting the top of the trees and crashing, killing those on board. The second issue is the airport, which is coming in for increasing criticism as a military airport which has not been in constant use for some 30 years, and they were lacking the officials there to help guide the plane safely in. Now, the third thing is the plane itself, a Russian Tupolev 154 belonging to the Polish nation, and also having a Polish pilot at the controls. The plane was some 30 years old, and it has a history of accidents dating back to 1975. Let me just give you an idea of the number of accidents. 2 in 2010, 1 in 2009, 2 in 2006, 1 in 2004, 2 in 2002, 2 in 2001, and so on and so on and so on, going back to 1975. However, it is considered a reliable plane when it isn't kept in good condition, and now the latest investigation by the emergency ministries and the other ministries already on the scene there in Smolensk, south of Moscow, is whether the plane had the necessary navigation equipment to land the plane safely.
Okay, Daniel Bushell. Now, you are live in Moscow. Let's cross over to RT's Katerina Azarova. So, Katerina, to you, the Polish president died on his way to Katyn, a village on the border between Russia and Poland, where thousands of Polish war prisoners were killed by the Soviet secret police. Can you recently visited Katyn. Tell us how this has been a sticking point in relations between the two countries and the importance of Kaczynski's visit.
Well, Rory, Katyn is a very difficult aspect and a difficult point in relations between Moscow and Warsaw. In the 1940s, over 4,000 Polish officers who were taken prisoners in the late 1930s. They were executed there in the spring of 1940, taken out to mass graves, shot in the back of the head and buried. For years, the Soviet Union denied any knowledge of what had happened to over 20,000 Polish officers taken prisoners, and only decades after did the truth finally begin to come out. Mikhail Gorbachev was the first to officially apologize for what became known as the Katyn massacre, and later the Russian President Boris Yeltsin released documents from the archives, all the documents related to this horrible, tragic event, with signatures on the execution orders from Joseph Stalin and Lavrentiy Beria, the head of the Soviet secret police. And so it's been a very, very difficult aspect of relations between Russia and Poland, and the fact that only days ago both the Russian and the Polish Prime Minister were there commemorating the victims of the totalitarian regime, both Soviet and Polish prisoners of war, political prisoners, is a huge step in relations. Both Prime Ministers stressing the fact that it was a turning point in ties between Moscow and Warsaw, that it was a time to forget the past, not exactly perhaps forget the past, but to acknowledge the past, to pay the respects, all due respects to the past, but not carry it into the future and not let it mar relations between Moscow and Warsaw. So this was a hugely significant event, with both prime ministers laying wreaths and lighting candles at the graves of Polish officers. The Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, saying that even a year ago, nobody could have imagined that the Russian Prime Minister would bow his head to the graves of the Polish officers who were executed there in 1940. So it's a huge event that was played up in all international media, that was hugely covered by the Polish media, and for something like this to happen only days afterwards is going to deliver a crushing blow to the Polish side, of course, to possibly going to affect the relations between Moscow and Warsaw. I believe we can now look a little bit closer at my report for the details and the history of what became known as the Katyn massacre.
The machine of Stalin's totalitarian regime operated in secrecy, with details still coming out today. But what could have remained a national tragedy became international when over 20,000 Polish officers were executed in 1940. Katyn was one of the 4 locations where the Poles were murdered. The Soviet Union denied any responsibility and even trying to blame Nazi forces for the killings. But a document released by Russian President Boris Yeltsin in the 1990s clearly showed the signature of Joseph Stalin on the execution order. An apology was made, documents were released, and monuments erected, everything necessary, it might seem, to lay this tragic past to rest. But not everyone is prepared to let bygones be bygones. To this day, many in Poland cannot forgive Russia for the Katyn massacre, and not just because of the killings themselves. Poland demands that all archives be opened in order that the complete truth be revealed and any surviving perpetrators be brought to justice. But politicians may not be seeing the wood for the trees. Katyn was a tragedy that has been acknowledged and mourned, as the bell that tolls here every morning testifies. Katerina Azarova, RT, Katyn, Smolensk region.
So as you see, Rory, the memorial is almost a sacred ground for Polish people, for Russian people, and it became a turning point. The visit of the Russian and the Polish prime ministers there became a turning point in Polish relations. Of course, many in Poland are now going to associate Katyn not only with the deaths of its officers in 1940, but also with the tragic demise of their president. So this is definitely going to shake up the Polish people and may well affect the relations between Moscow and Russia in the future. However, it is perhaps important to focus mainly on the fact that this, despite the fact that it certainly is a tragic death, was an accident first and foremost, and whilst the Katyn massacre was the works of the Soviet totalitarian machine and regime, this is nothing of the sort, and perhaps not many, if anyone, could be held responsible for it.
Reporting for us live in Moscow with the Kremlin in the distance there, and RT's Daniel Bushell as well outside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you both.